But without any further ado, I want to mihi atu kia tuari and kai ai ia te wā, nurura tēnā koe te rangatira.
Well, kia ora koutou te whānau. Thank you for having me today. So very quickly, my people come from a number of different places, from the far north in a small place called Ahipara, and Te Rarawa there in beautiful Ahipara. A little further south, in Te Taitonga, Ngai Tōhuriri and Tuihiwi, just outside of Christchurch. We also have whakapapa even further south down to Tairoa Heads in Utipoti. I'm Samoan, and I'm also a Cook Islander through my grandmother as well. It's interesting today when I got asked to do this kōrero, I was kind of thinking, what are some of the cool things that I can say to start off with are going to make me sound educated, travelled, and interesting? And I couldn't come up with anything. So I looked at what Vaughan had put up and what everyone had put up about my profile, and it talked a lot about what I'd learned in working with indigenous people around the world. And I think for me, what I'd like to do, just to give a little bit of context to my own journey, and hopefully not take too long to do it, give you a little bit of an insight into, I guess, what my experience has been and where it comes from. The thing that I always wanted to be as a kid was a superhero. I'm old enough to remember Biff Bang Bong Batman climbing up buildings, wearing undies on the outside of his shorts and all the rest of that. And so I grew up watching superheroes, grew up watching Superman and all those sort of things. And yeah, I guess for me, the reality of my upbringing was, as many of us have experienced, was a lot of violence and drugs and all of those kind of stereotypes, which we're working very hard to get rid of. But, you know, I don't think anyone here really needs me to put too fine a point on what that meant. So I came from a big family, and we all found ways in which we wanted to escape the reality that we were living in. And my sisters became very, very astute in academics. They became wonderful academics and did extremely well. All the boys, we all got into sport in a big way, and that was kind of our way out, our focus. And for me, my brothers were very good at anything they got into. One of them was a world champion wrestler. They were Asian Pacific champions. They usually ended up fighting each other in Olympic wrestling for first and second. They had incredible careers. They were great rugby players, great sports people. I, as I said, wanted to be Batman. So I wanted to be a superhero. Now, in the beginning, and when I relate this story as I got older, I forgot about wanting to be a superhero. Because let's be honest, if I say I want to be a superhero to a group of big brown men who are focused on how much they can drink, how many people they can score, and all those sort of things, you know, it kind of tends to sort of create a little bit of radio silence. But I think what I remember about it and what I liked about the idea of being a superhero was, one, not so much wearing undies on the outside of the pants, but it was really about the idea of service to other people. What I liked was not so much the superpowers, it was the fact that perhaps something I did and a way that I acted could have some kind of positive effect on the people that were around me, and particularly the people that I love the most. I didn't get into rugby and league and those sort of things. I got very much into martial arts, and this year is my 44th year practicing martial arts. And for me, I think the reason that I got into it, to be totally honest, was because I saw Star Wars and they're waving swords and wearing things that look like pajamas, and I wanted to be a Star Wars. I wanted to be Luke Skywalker. I remember at school, all these kids with blonde hair and blue eyes explaining to me why I could never be a superhero or be in Star Wars, because Luke Skywalker had blonde hair and blue eyes. I had big lips, afro, and I was brown. So that was made very clear to me that that was not going to be my future. So in reference to growing up and my later work, I wanted to find ways that I could be of service to people. I wanted to find ways in which I could grab a vision of myself and find some sense of power and some sense of defining myself. And like a lot of people do, I think in the formative years, in particular with our rangatahi now, I'm 49, so it's difficult for me to relate to. I can remember there was no such thing as the internet. But I just remember being very much influenced by television and movies and those kinds of things. And going through a lot of my life trying to sound, look, and act like other people. Very much wanting to be Bruce Lee. Now I'm 6'4" and a big Polynesian guy, so the idea that I was going to be 5'6", a Chinese kung fu master kind of, that was not going to be a reality for me. And I spent a lot of time trying to fit myself into these boxes that I saw that were created by other people. So I also spent a lot of time trying to be what I thought other people wanted me to be and moving away from what were my values. I got involved in theatre and acting and got involved in all sorts of opportunities to work on television and stage and all these sort of things. And that was a lot of fun, because what was fun about it was I spent a lot of time not being myself. I had an excuse to say and do things that I would never do, and say things that I would never say, and be the bad guy and all that sort of stuff, which I loved. The problem with that was that I found that whilst I was out there telling other people's stories, I wasn't telling my own. I wasn't telling our own stories. And for me, in terms of my own resilience, was understanding that being Māori, being Pacific, being brown wasn't a handicap, it was actually a superpower. So that was a massive step. For a long time, I think I carried this kind of chip on my shoulder, this ghetto mentality, for want of a better word, that I believed that somehow I was less than everyone else and needed to prove it in some way, shape or form. Now, I talked a little bit about getting involved in the martial arts, and what led me to being in the martial arts was that I had an uncle who paid attention to me. And what happened was he didn't speak with his hands. He didn't hit me to make a point. He didn't make fun of me. There was this element of kindness about him. Now, for me, he would say things like, it's not that you're stupid, it's just that you haven't learned to use your brain yet. And it seems like a small thing to say, but I was used to being told my whole life that I was dumb, that I was stupid. And the idea that I was making stupid decisions as opposed to actually being stupid was a massive change. The idea that I had something worthwhile and something worth putting out there was hugely impacting on me, especially later on in life. And I saw that his kindness and his taking the time to show me kindness and respect and all those sort of things actually meant a great deal to me and impacted the way that I saw myself in the world. Also, I was really lucky to have a super supportive grandmother. As a lot of us know, our grandparents were really important. And she was one of those people that when I was a kid and I said, I think I'm supposed to do something, she said, yeah, you do. And as I got older, I kind of lost that. As I got older, I kind of stopped believing that. And I found other ways to sort of fill my time and my mind and the gaps in myself, and looked at really negative things and addictive tendencies to sort of fill those gaps. So I think that when we talk about leadership, and I think that when we talk about resilience, I think those two things are really closely connected. If we look at it from a tikanga perspective, Rangatira, to weave people, to be a people weaver. And for me, what I believe leadership to be is really at its highest level, it's about service. And how do we serve? What's the difference between the way in which we want to walk in terms of tikanga, whether we be wherever we're from? What is service? What is leadership? And how does it actually connect? Resilience is a kind of a catchphrase at the moment. And how do we create resilience? Well, in order to create resilience, I think we have to first create the platform for vulnerability. Vulnerability, as we know, is not seen, especially I know, and I can speak from my upbringing, was not seen as something that was positive. It was seen as weakness. Vulnerability, the ability to ask for help, the ability to identify what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it. So for me, what I had this default mechanism growing up that it was either you are my friend or you are my enemy. I was happy or I was angry. So I carried for a long time a number of two things in my toolkit. you know, well, actually one was a hammer. And you know that old saying, when the only thing you carry is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. And that was definitely the way that I had experienced my early life. And in terms of vulnerability, I needed to learn how to have more than that one tool. I needed how to learn to be frightened, afraid, vulnerable, scared, confused, all of these kind of things where in the past I'd relied on anger and reaction to get me out of those sort of situations. And a lot of what we're talking about and a lot of what you're doing, it is about leadership, but what kind of leadership do we choose to have? So for my uncle did this. My uncle, he took time to train me. He took time to tear the back seat out of one of his old cars that had the old springs in it. And he taught me how to do front flips onto a mattress. I mean, I was only a little kid, obviously. But, you know, that time spent made me want to get outside and practice in the winter. It made me get into the forest. It made me train in the sea. And then in 2000, it led me to winning the world championships. And I've won the world championships 3 times. I've been the best in the world at what I do 3 times in my life. Not the best there was ever been, and certainly not the best in the world now, but the best at what I do. And the reason that I reached that level was because of the small kindnesses that were given to me along that path. It was about how I was led. It was about meeting people that truly understood what it was to be of service. People who I looked at and went, oh my gosh, how do I be that person? I can never be that person. But it was people at such a high level able to open their hearts and their minds in a way that allowed me for a moment to see myself in a way that I'd never seen myself before. And that's what's unique in the world in which we're living, the way in which we choose to live, and the way in which we choose to lead can be of such inspiration. You know, we tend to look at ourselves and measure ourselves. I know I certainly do, by the stick of what we have, what we got, what we're after, and it becomes this kind of endless cycle of more, more, more. I need this. If I have this, it'll make me happy. If I do this, it'll make me happy. If I am thought of in this way, if I have this amount of money, I have this car and this house. Now, all those things are wonderful things to have, and I'm not begging those things. But in terms of leadership, how do we support the people around us? My uncle taught me these small things that encouraged me to get out in midwinter in Dunedin in the midwinter and train in the ice. There was snow on the bank of the sandbank when I was training. But what happened was he inspired in me every time I got in there. I thought about someone believes in me. I'm doing this for a greater purpose, and I didn't understand it at the time. There were people who looked at me and thought, look at this idiot, he's been watching too much Karate Kid. But what it was is I had a greater vision of myself, and I think that's what resilience is. I think that's what leadership is, the ability to inspire us not to own the vision, but to create a vision, help people craft the vision. When we work in a business world, what is it that we're putting out there that people can hoof to? What is it that they can grab? How is it they can see themselves? How is it that we can create something which is different? What are our strengths, not our weaknesses? What are the things that tikanga give us? You know, Jason was talking, Jason was delivering a korero in Hastings. I was lucky enough to be there at it a couple of weeks ago. And what she was talking about, the strength of being descended from gods. It's a lofty concept, but a true one. If we see ourselves as being descended from celestial beings of power and mana and integrity that have inspired all these things, then who are we to whakiti ourselves? Who are we to believe ourselves to be anything smaller? Those small moments of curiosity, those small moments of kindness can change everything. Resilience is an interesting word. I would equate it to the kupu whakapihitanga, in the sense that whakapihitanga is kind of like the notion of slavery. The idea that we are shackled to certain ideas about ourselves, who we are, where we come from, what we're capable of, I think is bullshit. I think that when we can get really honest with ourselves and we can surround ourselves with people who believe likewise, we can change everything. The question is do we want to own the vision, or do we want to hold it and then pass it on for it to be lifted higher? You know, we're surrounded by people who, we talk about intellectual property rights and all those things are valid points, but the vision only grows when we share it. It's not ours to finish, it's ours to hold and take it as far as we can and give on to others. That's the difference. That's the difference between resilience. When I think of our old people, they thought in terms of generationally. They thought in terms of hundreds, if not thousands of years. They weren't planning for tomorrow. They weren't planning for the day. They were planning 4 generations. They were planning within 4 generations' time. So how do we do that? How do we create the idea that we are in some way, shape or form able to do these things? And I think what it comes down to is the way that we engage with each other. It's the honesty that we put out there. We want people to feel like they can come and talk to us. We want people to feel like we can be vulnerable. And some people get frightened when those terms come up, because vulnerability is also equated with the idea of being non-professional. We have to keep a professional distance. And everyone here is professional enough to know what that is. There is a massive difference between empathy and sympathy. You know, and I don't, not to put too fine a point on it, but the definition I'm working with is you pass someone who's lying in a ditch, okay? You pass someone who's lying in a ditch, and if you're feeling empathy, you're going, oh, there's someone lying in a ditch, you put a hand down to pull them up. Sympathy is when you pass someone lying in a ditch, you look down and you hop down and down beside them, you hop in the ditch and you bleed as well. And that gets us nowhere. So how do we create these mechanisms? We have to lead them, we have to demonstrate them, and we have to be brave. And that's the scariest thing of all. I know for me, getting real, getting honest and talking about these things, you know, for me, I've got a background in personal protection and worked in lots of places with lots of sand and lots of other places. And that scares me less than having to get real about what I feel, what I truly believe, and to tell my own story and to be open to it. So I guess today, in terms of talking about resilience, what is it to you? What do you believe it to be? Do you believe it to come from a place of weakness? Do we believe the stereotypes that we've been taught? Or do we look at our tikanga, do we look at our whakapapa, do we look what our culture teaches us, and do we embrace the notion that rangatiratanga, being a rangatira, is about service? Do we embrace the idea that vulnerability is about putting something out that other people can, putting out a vision that other people can grab and they can own and they can shape? So for me, I think that have a think about we're you know, forward facing. We want to see what other people are doing, but in order to do that, they have to see the reflection of that in how we move and how we talk and what we put out there. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my starting point. I don't want to sort of monopolize too much of this quarter. I know I've probably yabbered for too long already, but yeah, there's some thoughts. So I'll just throw it out to Jason and the rest of everybody. Kia ora.
O kia ora tū, tino pai tēnā. Yeah, I always wanted to be a superhero too. I actually like Wonder Woman. I thought in the 70s and 80s, she was a pretty cool cat. I mean, I didn't think I could pull it off, but certainly every one of us has probably found a superhero that we would kind of like to have been. It quickly got replaced by Spider-Man because...
Well, you didn't like the invisible jet.
yeah. Didn't think I could pull off the white boots either. But the main message here is that when we see ourselves as something potentially greater than our present, then we shouldn't dismiss it just simply as fanciful. And one of the key things that Tuari has brought up is this idea that in order to be incredibly resilient, just like what's happening in COVID, is that we've actually got to find our way to be more vulnerable and be more honest about that. And for most of us, that's not usually our default, but clearly it's a key message in terms of our resilience. And so I'm just going to open that up. People's thoughts on resilience, people's thoughts on who their superhero was. Yeah, we'd like to know your superhero before you start, if you do open up the mic. So just going to open it up, and Pete, Vaughan, you may have something to contribute to that.
Yeah, interesting insights, and I fully agree. It's sometimes it's more important to know yourself first. Growing up, I was always a bit small and playing rugby, and I wanted to be an All Black, and I think I can still make it, but I haven't had the call yet. But those are the aspirations you have as a young person coming through. And with my career, I came to a crossroad where I had a choice, and it was one person probably had a bit of faith in me, and I took that, and my career started from there. I really wasn't sure why it hasn't started, but one person having faith in you and just giving you a bit of a leg up or a bit of encouragement makes a difference. And I sort of say to my kids, as you go through your life, there's going to be crossroads. And it's about making choices, and there's no wrong choice, but just don't be afraid to make a choice. And that's what I try and say to them. But all insightful stuff. And yeah, belief, resilience. I mean, resilience, and one of the hardest things is, I think, honesty as well. Being honest with yourself. So you can have resilience, but first of all, you've got to be honest in your own self, and just be clear about that. You know, so that it's not easy, and sometimes we're the hardest judges of ourselves. So yeah, just something to think about. Thanks, Tuari.
Peter, who was your superhero? Was it Dr. X, or who was?
I wasn't a TV kind of guy. We had a big backyard, and there was kids, and we were always playing rugby or soccer or something. And we had fruit trees that never bore fruit for 15 years because we were always kicking the shit out of them with footballs and stuff. So I guess we learned resilience because when you're 10 years old and, I don't know, 40 kilos, and the 16-year-old kid next door is fending you off to score a try, you sort of you got to stand up sometimes. But if I had to have a superhero, who would it be?
Hey, don't stretch yourself there, Pete. Jeez, it was just a quick question. You know, if you haven't got one, you haven't got one. Vaughan?
Well, I'll kick off. My superhero was definitely Flash Gordon, Savior of the Universe. He was my man. But look, in terms of the word resilience, one of the things I think, listening to you speak, Tuari, and that was awesome, is that it's something I've never been short of. But one of the things about resilience is that that's not necessarily good things, because just because you are resilient to get yourself through something, sometimes giving in and allowing yourself to be broken down is an important part of, and I'm a big believer of breaking things down and building them back up again. And I suppose that, I'm only speaking with a few years of wisdom of probably having time to think about that. And the hardest challenge for me, and I'm thinking in terms of post owning a small business and looking back and thinking, Jesus, if only I knew this stuff now, I would have been better at making hard decisions. It's just honesty. It really is. It's that ability to not fear honesty. Sometimes honesty is just tough, and therefore it goes, over there and not here. And I think that, having sort of embraced that, it doesn't mean that you're wandering around lying your guts out. It's confronting the difficult things that need to be confronted and not trying to find some other half-assed way of getting around it and then making a much worse job of it than you could have. But, in terms of our small business community and thinking about this resilience and stuff like that, I see many articles online about mental health in the small business, and I roll my eyes a bit about them, because the truth is that most small business owners, and there's 550,000 small businesses, and there's probably 400,000 owners, and amongst that, most of us are nut jobs before we came small business owners, and that's the reason why we own our own small business, because no one else wants to employ us. We've either been made redundant, or we're not a team player, or we have this notion we want to work for ourselves. So we're a high maintenance kind of individual that's not easy, just not easy. And trust me, I've got years of advisory to prove that.
So it'd be easy to work with you, wouldn't it, Vaughan? Buddy.
Well, yeah, looking at the unicorn. Yeah, so I think that I think that what I probably was trying to get to, as far as mental health in the small business, it's always been there. There's always been anxiety and stuff like that. It's just that it takes a crisis for everybody to talk about it, like a pandemic. But yeah, and just the other thing was, you know, at what point in your life do you finally give in and say, right, you got me, you know, I'm laid bare, here it is. I'm not the egotistical legend you thought I was. You know, I'm just like everybody else. And I certainly had that moment. And it was sitting, you know, 5 a.m. In the morning, on a May morning in a cold police cell floor. And that was my rock bottom, was the police cell floor. So there you go, you know, you sort of start to wake up. Yeah, thanks, bro.
Thanks, Vaughan. Questions come in as well from an external question. It's a little bit about resilience, because part of it is, you know, how we might be strong leaders, but we might be struggling ourselves to also serve at the same time. So, you know, in terms of keeping that balance, if I'm to be a strong leader, but I'm struggling at the same time to serve others, yeah, what's some tips to help me deal with it? So I'll put it back to you too, in terms of trying to organize those two kind of responsibilities at the same time, and how you're thinking about it.
Kia ora. Thanks for that, bro. And thanks, Vaughan. And thanks, guys, for that feedback. It's given me a lot to think on. I think, and it's easy for me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's really important to know that what we do is not who we are. Like Vaughan was talking about, you know, sometimes the crash to the bottom is inevitable, or it's just something that we can't control, and it does happen. The ability to sort of recreate ourselves, you know, there's all those kind of platitudes that come out, you know, hit bottom and all the rest of that. And then, you know, there's only way is up after hitting the bottom. I mean, there's all that. I think that it's first starting and looking at, is what I do who I am? If so is what's a good example? I mean, was Michael Jordan just a basketball player? Basketball player is what we know of Michael Jordan, but there's so much more to him. He's a complex business mind, and he surrounds himself with interesting people and people that support him. I think that, have a think about who you're surrounding yourself with. If you are in the company of people who genuinely have your back, and I'm not talking about the yes people that tell you whatever you hear. I think it's really important to think about who you surround yourself with. You know, you get with that person and they suck the air out of the room, you can feel them coming up the driveway, and you're like, close the curtains and lie on the floor and hope they go away. Well, if you have a 5-second moment where you can count to 5 and you ask yourself, is this the kind of person that I want to be around? Is this the kind of people that I want to be around? And the answer is no, then maybe it's time to think about the people that we surround ourselves with. So for me, I suppose what I would say is to realize that what we do is not who we are. It's an important part of how we see ourselves, but also to create support networks. And again, I know for me, sometimes the word whānau takes on a wider context as well. There are plenty of people I have in my whānau that I'm not related to. There are plenty of people that I am related to that are not my whānau. So have a think about the makeup of our whānau. Find people who will listen. Find people who will not just wait for their opportunity to tell you what you should do. If you have people in your life who you're trying to talk to them, and their first response is, well, what you need to do is, maybe it's time to think about getting different people. It's important to get people that hear you, not just listen for the break in the conversation to start talking. I think that if you can start with that also too, if you're the focal point for everyone else, if your life is spent giving out to everyone else, and you don't have people in your life that are supporting, that are putting stuff back into you, or that if you suddenly go, I actually need 10 minutes, and they can't live with it, they go, I need you to be what I need you to be for me, then they're not really there for you, they're there for them. So I suppose the short answer, Jay, would be 1, think about who you're around, and 2, think about, is what I'm doing who I am, or is it what I'm doing? I think that's probably just 2 off the top of my head. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, those are very cool insights in terms of who we surround ourselves with, and who fills our energy, who fills our cup. And it's pretty hard to serve others if you're kind of always on empty and half tanked. So you have to think about that. And I just want to circle back to this observation about there's always someone in our careers, in our working lives, that have inspired us or given us a little bit of confidence to do what we would love to do, and the importance of that. And if we've ever experienced that, I had a fabulous mentor when I came out of law school, a guy called Moana Jackson. He in the cities was quite hard because there wasn't many good Māori male role models, coming out of Courtney Place, downtown Wellington. And so they're quite a rare species. But when I came across it, I really loved the way if you could be strong in mind and still gentle. And he taught me a lot about that. And so I just want to just open that up, because a lot of what we do is based on something, or an uncle that has seen something in us, or a mentor that has seen something wonderful about ourselves. And I've just opened that up back to everyone that's on the call, but also to the mentors, and just maybe share some of these moments where we've had a great mentor, and it's basically the reason why you're doing what you're doing now. Someone's just put in Mighty Mouse into the chat. That was clearly one of their superheroes. Thanks, Anaru, for that. I'm glad you finally,
put that in the theme park.
Yeah, so great mentors. Guys, you want to chip in on that, Pete, Vaughan?
Right, Pete.
I was lucky enough playing rugby to play with Buck Shelford, and he'd come back to our club, North Shore. He came back from a successful European tour with the All Blacks, and the rule we had at our club was you had to play for the reserve grade first. So here's the All Black captain, unbeaten through the UK and Europe, comes back home. He's got to sit on the bench for the second team. Buck didn't say one word. He went straight to the dressing room, got changed, training with the team, started on the weekend in the second team at 1 o'clock. Something he probably hadn't done for many, many years. But he did not say one word. He did not try to lead the team. He did nothing. It's just he was there to play his part in the team. His role wasn't the captain. His role was to be part of the team, and that's exactly what it did. And to me, that showed a lot about the man and about who he is.
Nice. I just want to pick up, Tuari, what you talked about in terms of who you surround yourself with, and it made me think who I actually have in my universe around me. And one of the interesting things about that is how you find each other. They find you and you find them through the most unusual circumstances, whether it's somebody introducing, but I've sort of, I really value my very small network that I have, but they are more of a reflection of who I am this last 5 years than probably the last 58, really. And what that is I am very, very careful how I allocate my time. So it doesn't mean the number of people I know has changed, but the number of people I actually make myself available to has changed, because when I spend time with them, what I glean is so valuable that I wouldn't want to lose that opportunity. And the most valuable part of that is they are people that will call me out and tell me that I'm talking kaka, and I know that when they say it, it's coming from a place of love. So versus, those sorts of things. I think you've got to be able to accept that, but also it's no accident when you are surrounded by people like that, but it tends to manifest over time.
Ka pai, Vaughan. So what we're seeing, whānau, is the humbled down version of Vaughan Winiata. If you met him 38 years ago, might not have been the person that you wanted to go and have a cup of coffee with. And I think that's not really about Vaughan, that's about all of us, which is a test, which is, are you the kind of person that you would like to actually go and have a coffee and a cordial with? And half of this is, surrounding ourselves with people, but this is also about an external reflection of us. We tend to attract some of the things that we are. So if we are a bit of bit of an egocentric type person, then you can only expect to attract similar types of people. And so, yeah, having to be brutally mindful of that. So when we're thinking about those mentors and people that we would like to attract to our lives, then, you know, to think about, well, actually, I've got to start a little bit with myself. Am I actually a good person that people would like to deal with? And maybe I should, you know, work it from that angle at this stage. Okay, going to open it up a bit more for whānau. I know people are going to have questions, so yeah, just raise your hand and let it fly, because we might not have Tuari, you know, back with us again until maybe next week or so. So yeah, use this opportunity, guys. Oh, bye. All right, looks like well-being's alive and well. Kim, go.
Mike.
Oh, kia ora, Tuari. I'm really stoked to be able to listen to you today. I've got a question. I'm coming at it from the other side though. So I wouldn't, my business my small business that I'm starting is actually focused around mental health and wellbeing, rongoa Māori to help people in that space. And my question for you is, I sometimes suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome trying to help people in the mental health space, because, you know, if you ask me where I rate myself on the spectrum, I'd say I'm pretty good, and so I'm just curious how you go about that, and how you can kind of meet people at a similar level so that you can help raise them up.
Kia ora, thank you for that. That's what a beautiful question. In terms of imposter syndrome, 5 minutes before we had this call, I was wrestling with imposter syndrome. I don't think it's anything that goes away. I think that the tape plays, and I'm going, well, I'm going to be sitting amongst all these business people. Look, I didn't really learn how to read until I was 25 years old. I spent a lot of my young life pretending I was smarter than what I was. And Jay knows me from back in the day, so he knows how smart I used to think I was and wasn't. But seriously, with imposter syndrome, I think it's important to realize, we talked about that, you know, the uncle that I had, or the auntie, or the friend, or the mentor. I think it's important to realize that you are that to someone. Everyone here is that to someone. You are their Michael Jordan, or you are their James Bond, or their Wonder Woman, or their Superman, or whoever. There is someone or some people in your life that you are that. You have that power. You have that yay or nay where people look to you and you are that to them. Imposter syndrome exists when we forget to take time to watch the movie that we're creating with our lives. We spend so much time being in our lives, we don't often take time to look back and go, hey, holy shit, this is actually, the writers were pretty cool and we're doing some really wonderful stuff. The beautiful thing too about rongoa Māori is that, you know, there are no rules, in the sense that you are able to create something because it's so new in the world in terms of the way in which people approach Māori health, or hauora Māori, that it has huge applications, because it, as you know, I'm not talking to anyone who doesn't know, that is about a mental, physical, spiritual, cultural shift. And that's a really beautiful thing. I would encourage you to treat your imposter. This is how I do it. I invite my imposter to come down and sit next to me and have a coffee. And then I go, I know you're there, and thanks for coming in. 2 sugars? 2 sugars, all right? And then I push the coffee across and go, you drink your sugar. Now, the imposter syndrome comes from a place of, traditionally what it was is that we have all these mechanisms hardwired into us to protect us from harm, from fear, from getting hurt, from being hungry, from being cold. And it's important to say, hey, you know what, you know how you're an imposter, you do that imposter syndrome thing because it's about protection. What about if you do this? What about if you go to the library, and I want you to go to the library, Mr. Imposter or Mrs. Imposter Syndrome, whatever you call it, and I want you to look at some strategies for strengthening me. Change the way in which, you know, in some ways that we look at that. So we ally that to strengthening ourselves. And I know that's easy to say. And I think it's all about how we frame it. And it's not something that I 100% all the time do, but it's something I 100% all the time try to do. And so maybe that's a way of thinking. I just want to mihi to you for putting that out there too. Your imposter syndrome and my imposter syndrome can go and have a coffee in the imposter cafe maybe. So kia ora.
Wonderful that. And you know, in business, when we sort of flick it back to those moments of sort of conversations and transactions and things like that, it's really helpful just to shout out what you don't do. You know, here are my non-goals. I am not the guru of te reo Māori. I am not the knower of all botany and all plants. You know, and it's quite nice to remove elephants out of the room, and it actually helps the imposter because then it takes power away from the imposter. You know, and people like a bit of honesty, but you're getting really clear on what you do. But I am the expert on this, right? And so you can reframe these things and be absolutely bullishly. And some of the best influencers that I've seen in action are people that are quite clear on the things that they don't do. And so they'll even start conversations on, okay, so here are my non-goals. I don't do this, this, and this. You know, and you clear those out of the room. And then you can get them focused on what you're good at, as opposed to them potentially thinking in their mind, oh yeah, but is she really good at te reo? Does she really know the Māori name for that plant? You know, that kind of stuff, you can remove that out. So I think that might be semi-helpful. Okay, whānau, we've got only about 3-4 minutes left, so we should make the most of this time. Vesna, how are you going? Natalia, are you okay? Maya, kei te pai koe. If you've got any partai for Tuari, this is a great time. Crystal, let fly. Even if it's just hey, this is my superhero. I'd be interested, Maya, in knowing who your superhero is, Natalia, be keen to know who your superhero is. So yeah, let's have a partai from you fellas. And a good way to mihi to Tuari as well for his time.
Kia ora. Kia ora watu Tuari. Thank you for your kōrero and insight. Been really interesting. So like I've been going over just a couple of words from someone who's recently passed away, and he was sitting down next to me when I sort of talked about a kaupapa. He came over to me and sort of gave me a few words. I can't remember the actual words, but it left me feeling like okay, so does he want me to give up? Like is he saying that this goal is too unachievable? Like and to lower the bar, you know, he thinks it might be achievable. Or is he saying like you know, like I can't do it? I didn't quite get clarity on that, but lately I've been thinking about it's been taking a bit too long for my liking to get this kaupapa going. Maybe it's time for me to give up on that, you know. And we're artists. We do this talk called the mangopare, which says to never give up. So it's kind of in my mind all the time, you know, like that inner demon that's telling you to give up. But the kaupapa of this vision is definitely a game changer for not just Māori, but all of Aotearoa. It is intergenerational, building intergenerational cultural wealth. But I know that if I don't give up, if I give up on it, it will never become reality. So I'm just kind of stuck.
Ka pai.
Yeah.
Ka pai tamanui. The good one to feedback into in terms of this inherent desire for us to keep going, even though everything's saying to us, Jace, what the hell are you doing? Like, you know, that kind of mangopari type bullish behavior, and some of our observations about that too. What are you thinking about that?
Kia ora pai. I obviously I don't know who you're referring to. So I'm assuming with someone who's passing away, you know, someone obviously a loved one. You know, we talk a lot about ukaipo and the things that we are fed as children and the things that we are fed in our formative years. One of the things that I was fed is that people like us don't do things like that. this is who we are. This is who we are. My father's fear of what it is, my father's fears were fed by his father, and his father being told, this is what we do, this is who we are, and this is what we don't do. What I would say to you, bro, is maybe consider, don't allow some other imposter's syndrome to speak to you. That's not put very well. What I mean is, don't allow other people's fear to become your fear. Look at it in whatever way you need to. Sometimes that protective aspect, especially if it's whānau, I know from my own perspective, my father told me it's a white man's world, so I needed to be a white man, and because that was told to him. And I grew up with these self-limiting beliefs, and the person who should have supported me most in the world was the person who was the most frightened man I ever knew. But it came from a place of love and concern. But also, bro, if you are moved to do something, if you are passionate about it, if it is just, it speaks to you and you dream about it and you see it and you can see it, and it just, there's something so intrinsic to you, sometimes other people can't capture that vision, especially as artists, because there is an element, Vaughan was talking about, there is a reason why all these small business owners, why we do the things the way we do, is because we have a vision that is hard for other people to get, and sometimes it's not a put upon them to get the vision. They just get to be a part of the benefit of that vision realised. So, bro, I would totally you in doing what you do. See where it comes. Does that whakaaro come from a place of fear? Does that come from a place of his own insecurities in terms of what we're capable of? I guess for me, a lot of my life was spent with that tape running in the background telling me it's a white man's world to be a white man. People like us don't do things like that. We don't go to school. We are this, we are that. And so, bro, I would say not to ignore, but maybe to reframe it and put it in its perspective and let it be what it needs to be, but don't let it detract from where you want to go and what you want to do.
Ka pai e hoa. Just the last question now we've got for the day is actually some ways that we can manage our own well-being. And so when you're actually out and not sure, you feel like you're locked in a bit of a corner in COVID, and some of the things that you might use to, as just simple but really practical strategies for that kind of rebalancing and getting clear again. What have you used over the years?
I think it's kind of varies for everyone, but I think in the first place, acknowledging the fact that you need to find stuff. For me, it's I suppose I would typify it in this way. It's the 100 things, the things that I'm really good at, the things that I put out into the world. The one or two things that I put out into the world require the 100 things that I do when no one's looking, in order to give me the clarity, the focus, the vision, and the belief to be able to put them out. So for me, it can be things, music is a huge part. Finding time to make time, to take time is a huge part of it. Actually diary it in your day. Maybe it's listening to a specific song. Maybe it's sitting in the car, even in lockdown, cranking up your favorite song, winding the windows down and singing as loud as you can. Maybe it's sort of sitting in a room or on the back step with a cup of tea. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's drawing. Whatever it is for you, you have to find something where there is an aspect of yourself where it's not, I'm not in service to everyone else. I'm not going to, the idea of taking a break is not, I'm going to take a break and just review these emails and send them back to my PA. It's the idea of doing something that doesn't make any sense other than to yourself. So for me, some of the ways in which I do that, I'm very much, this is, I like cold showers. It's really weird. For some reason, I like anything around water. I just love being in the water. If you're lucky enough to be somewhere where you're around trees, in Japan, they call it tree surfing. But there are those places and people and things that you do that you just walk away, and for whatever reason, you've had that mental break. For me, music is a big part of that, And not all of us are sopranos like Vaughan is, okay? Let's be honest about that. Not all of us are just able to break glass with our voices like Vaughan. But the thing is remember what makes you happy and do it for that reason. When people sing, it's not the people that are listening that are important, it's the singer. So find those things to do that serve you, and they don't have to make any kind of sense to anyone else. Maybe it's juggling a ball, maybe it's, I mean, for me, something that I used to do as a kid was I used to sit in my grandfather's wardrobe, and my grandfather passed away when I was a lot younger, but my grandmother kept his suits in the wardrobe, and whenever I got in there, I could smell my grandfather. An extreme example, but they used to comfort me, and I used to come out and feel a lot better for whatever reason. Whatever it is for you, spend as much energy trying to find that thing, and don't be frightened to try it and let it go, and try it and let it go and do whatever. Just keep trying, but find the thing that is your break, that is your thing. Not for everyone else, not something to put on social media, not to share with the world. Take something in, because you're also used to giving stuff out. Find that whakatau, find the thing which bases you and makes you happy and brings you back into yourself. So there endeth my sermon. Amen.
Ka pai. Well, just on behalf of everybody today, we the best so our virtual board catch-ups in terms of, you know, what we are trying to do and provide in terms of some Māori business owners and whānau while we're in the lockdown. So on behalf of the Poari and everyone here, we want to put a big shout out to you too, and thank you for doing the mahi in some of the most challenging environments for our people, and thank you for sharing some of your insights with us today. So yeah, ho mai te paki koa, mā tuari, kia ora.